You didn't tell me this house was built on an ancient Indian burial ground! No, you didn't! Well, that's not my recollection. Yeah, well, all right. Goodbye. He says he mentioned it 5 or 6 times. So yeah, this week we're obviously doing The Simpsons Treehouse of Horror. No, is that right? No, shit, that's right. We're actually doing Tobe Hooper's 1982 family horror classic, Poltergeist. I'm Liam, this is Rob, and you're listening to the Hey Guys podcast. And yeah, this is a really strange film because I grew up thinking of this as being like a family-friendly horror film. And now I've rewatched it, I'm like, there's nothing very family-friendly about this film. It's really strange.
Well, it's funny you say that when you say family-friendly, because I'll explain my experience with it in a second. I just want to go back to that fantastic introduction for a second.
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, it was pretty good.
Because I knew it's your turn to do the quote because you picked the film. And as I was watching this film, I'm like, if he doesn't do the whole, you moved the headstones but kept the...
Oh, I almost did. He loses his shit.
That's what I'm saying. So you kind of started that because he is losing his shit about you moved the headstones but kept the caskets, and you kind of mixed around his head because when you did that, then I went like, I know that, I've heard that, but I didn't hear it in the film. Where the fuck did that quote come from?
Where's that coming from? See, now you've mentioned it, I almost feel like I should have done Craig T. Nelson having an absolute breakdown because at one point it sounds like he just starts screaming in the dude's face.
Yeah.
Like, you moved the headstones, but you left up here. Ah! It's like, whoa, dude. And like for most of the film, he's like keeping his shit together, except when the giant head comes to the door. He has a bit of a meltdown there. But of all the things, he has that kind of like moment of super aggressive exposition. That's the only way I could describe it. Really aggressive exposition. But yeah, that's something of a moment in this film. So, I mean, the obvious quotes, the two that jump out are obviously they're here. And this house is clean by who we both thought was actually called Zelda Rubinstein in the film. Like, it turns out that's her actual name.
I've only ever seen this film once. I know about this film, obviously, and I know the character. Again, we mentioned a couple of weeks back in Total Recall about misquoting lines. And obviously everyone always in the Zelda, well, actually the Tangina voice, step into the light, Carol Ann. She never says that. She says to Diane, the mother, tell her to step into the light. But she never actually says step into the light herself.
Well, maybe it's just something to do with her, because growing up, if I had just done the quotes off the top of my head, I would have actually said, this house is clear. Yeah. That's what I always thought it was, but it's actually, this house is clean. Yeah. And I'm like, I actually think I prefer this house is clear, just because that's what I thought it was, I suppose.
We'll get to the fact that she lied, because the house was not clean.
Oh, we're going to get to that bullshit. Yeah. That was another thing I forgot. I was like, this house isn't clean at all. Clean, clear, whatever the fuck it is, it's 100% not. If anything, from that point onwards, it's much, much worse.
Because if this house is clean, there's an extra 20 minutes of them packing their house, because that's what was left in the film after they cleaned the house. But let's get... So, I watched this film when I was 7. Mm-hmm. I'm going back to when you to what you said about it being family friendly. So this film was released in 82. I was born in 83, so I watched it when I was 7, so 1990. I watched it because my older brother thought it would be funny to pin his 7-year-old brother down and make him watch a film that he didn't want. Mm-hmm. Fine. So I'm watching a horror film at that point. Again, family friendly, maybe not. This film caused me to have an incontrollable fear of clowns. Right? Like, yeah, because that clown is a cunt.
Like that clown. The thing is, though, right? Is the clown a cunt, or are the parents cunts, or is Robbie just a fucking moron? These are all questions. Take the end of this film, for instance, if we're going to stay on the clown subject.
We will, because I have a story.
Scariest looking clown I've ever seen, in terms of a toy. They put it, not only does it stay in his room, did somebody either buy it for him or did Robbie go to the shop and pick it for himself? But he puts it on a chair at the end of his bed, looking at him. He keeps trying to throw things over him. How about you just take that spooky-ass clown, you throw it in a cupboard. Okay, it's super creepy, whatever. So then your house is haunted, all this spooky shit goes on. Throughout this film, they're very chill about putting their kids back to bed on their own after, even when there are clearly poltergeists in the house. But at this point, after all this stuff is kicked off, sure, Zelda, whatever you want to call it, Tangina, has said this house is clean. it's a lie. But the first thing they do is just put the goddamn clown back in the same spot. Yeah. Oh, kids, I know there's been ghosts and poltergeists and everyone's freaked the fuck out and you've almost been, eaten by a tree, but we'll keep the spooky-ass clown at the bottom of your bed. It's madness. It's absolute madness.
It got to the point where I wouldn't sleep with a bed that had anything under it, like a gap under it. So the bed had to go out, and I slept on a mattress for nearly a year, right? So
does that come from this? Like, obviously it does for you, but that whole, that classic thing about there's something fucked up under the bed. Does that? It can't come back to this. It has. But I can't think of anything earlier.
I can't think of anything earlier, but there's got to be a lot because under your bed, has to be, right? One of the creepiest things. I mean, for starters, Pet Cemetery. Because the little kid hid under the bed and slit his Achilles heels, and that was before this, wasn't it? Actually, no, this wasn't. 82. Pet Cemetery was after this, wasn't it?
Yeah, Pet Cemetery. I'm sure there must have been something before this, before we had clowns dragging you under the bed.
So we'll get off my fear of clowns. I will iterate that as a 38-year-old male, I am no longer scared of clowns, but I don't want to see one in a dark alley. But
no, that would be the thing is clowns. I don't have an issue with clowns, but it's clowns in places they shouldn't be. And as you say, that's a perfect example. Like if I'm walking down a dark alley on my own and I just see a clown, I'm going to be like, oh, dude, what the fuck is that doing here? It's just not going to be cool, is it? No, you just don't want to see a clown down a dark alleyway.
Well, in our house, growing up, my mother had a clown money box. Now, this thing was creepy as fuck to me, especially after this film, right?
Yeah.
It had the creepy smile, it had the eyes that followed you. And when you went up the stairs, as you go up the stairs in the house that I grew up in, you had a small window where the light would come through and shine down the stairs. And my mother, that's where she kept the money box, right next to my bedroom. So I was never allowed, it wasn't that I wasn't allowed. I hated having to go to the toilet in the middle of the night because I'd have to run past the gaze of this clown. Freaked me out. I hated it.
It's really, don't you realise, so the clown was a money box, yeah?
Yeah.
Well, that's genius. Like your mum's like, all right, where can I keep this money and make sure my kid with his grubby little fingers will never get to it? What's he terrified of? Oh, yeah, clowns. I'll put it in a clown. Jesus, what?
I'm getting to the bed. So I plucked up the courage one day and I took the clown out. Took it out, mate. I took him out. Off the windowsill, head popped off, triumphant me. Killed the clown, happy days. I go to school. I come home. I go through the door. Mum's out the back doing nothing. Like, hi, Mum, I'm going to go up to my room. Walk up the stairs, triumphant. I look up. He's back in the same spot, head back on. My mother had glued him properly back, like a puzzle piece. Didn't tell me that she'd fixed it. Put it back. She knew exactly what she was doing. Put it back on the fucking windowsill. As I look up, see the clown fall back down the stairs.
Oh my goodness!
Because
and the thing is, it's going to be creepier as well because it's all kind of like half broken and busted up.
To me, this fucking thing was resurrected. Because my mum didn't. Fix it. My initial thought as I was probably 9 or 10-year-old boy at that time, was not that my mother fixed the clown. It was the fact that this clown has just come back to life. Fuck yeah. I was consolable for a little while.
That's one of the great things about this film is, and we mentioned it last week in the first part of our horror podcast Triple Bill with the Evil Dead is like, because it's kind of quite nebulous, the concept, it's just evil, that they could get away with doing whatever they wanted. It wasn't one character. You could be as imaginative as they wanted to be. And the same is true with this. Like, there's this whole thing is, there's an evil poltergeist on the other side of the door. But basically they just say, it's kind of realizing your deepest, darkest fears. So that just allows them, again, free reign to do whatever they want to completely scare the crap out of this family. And of course, there's mixed results. In fairness, I was like, the tree thing's going to be pretty lame. Because like you, I hadn't seen this film for years. But then when I watched the scene again and the tree is literally eating Robbie, I was like, oh man, that's actually pretty, and everyone says it, especially... Nobody acts more terrified in the film, I think, than Robbie.
Yeah.
Like, you know, he really does freak the fuck out quite a few times.
And
I'm like, in fairness, almost being eaten by a tree, it's like, yeah, that's pretty messed up. And it was just one of the many examples in this film where I was under the assumption I was going to go back and be like, oh, it'll still be good, but the effects will be really ropey. But a lot of the effects are actually still pretty good.
They're not too bad. So you said Robbie being scared. Robbie, scared of clowns. My name's Rob, scared of clowns. This fucking film impacted me.
Yeah.
It impacted me massive back then. But moving on. So again, I've only ever watched it once, and it's not to the fact that I got over my fear, blah blah blah, yada yada. I just never went back to watch these films. So it was really good to go back and watch it. Now, one thing that shocked me more than anything else, that it was Steven Spielberg.
Yeah, well, that's another one of the weird things with this film, because I guess this is kind of going back to my initial point, is that this film, when I was growing up, there was obviously, you know, when you think of 80s horrors and stuff, when we were growing up, there was all like the Friday the 13th, all that spiel. This, however, felt like one of those films that nearly everyone watched. And I think a large part of it was because of the Spielberg thing, because you saw like the little girl, and it does have that whimsical element to it, that Spielberg magic, which I think meant that a lot of parents allowed their kids to watch Poltergeist. But it's only when you go back and watch this, and as I said, in my head, I was kind of convinced this was like a family-friendly horror, you know, kind of very gentle. And then you watch it, and a lot of it is actually pretty dark. I can't think of another film like this, which kind of marries kind of like that whimsy, I suppose, you know, almost like a family-friendly movie with genuine horror tropes. The closest to it, and they're all 80s films, and, you know, a big part of this is that the nature of Amblin films from the 80s, where these films weren't, they didn't mind scaring the shit out of kids. You know, you think back to like Raiders of the Lost Ark and Melting Faces and stuff. Like, that stuff just wouldn't be in a PG film nowadays. It just wouldn't be the case. And I thought it was going to be a lot more like that, a lot more of that kind of family-friendly stuff. But if you go back and watch it, and sure, there is that Spielberg whimsy, but this is directed fundamentally by Tobe Hooper, the guy who made the most horror of all horror films, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And I was watching, I was like, this is definitely more horror than I was expecting. And there is like a big question mark with this film in regards to Spielberg's involvement. Just how much did Spielberg direct this film? Because it is listed as Steven Spielberg presents a Tobe Hooper film, but a lot of people suggest that Spielberg was actually hugely involved in the direction of this film. And the reason he wasn't the official director was actually because he was making E.T. at the same time. And contractually, he wasn't allowed to direct another film while he was making E.T. So they put Tobe Hooper on the bill, but his involvement was still absolutely massive. And the only thing I can compare it to in terms of tone is actually AI. I'm not sure if you've seen that, the Spielberg film.
Unfortunately, yes, I have.
Unfortunately, well, whatever you may think of the film, tonally that film is insane because it feels half Kubrick and half Spielberg.
And you know exactly when Kubrick stopped filming that and Spielberg began. Like you can definitely see the differences in that film.
Yeah, that feels like a film cut in half.
Yeah.
That feels like the first half is a Kubrick film and the second half is a Spielberg film. This film feels like it goes back and forth. There's real, like, classic scenes of, I keep saying Spielberg whimsy, but like with the fantastic Jerry Goldsmith score kicking in, especially for like exposition scenes by the psychoanalyst, I forgot the name of the role, and Zelda herself, Tangina.
Dr. Martha Lesh, her name was,
Yeah. And when they're kind of delivering, like, all exposition should be delivered the way Spielberg delivers it in his films. Like, you know, the way they're all sitting on the floor and Tangina's delivering it and the Jerry Goldsmith score's playing. And you're like, there's something magical about this film. But then 20, 30 minutes later, Diana looks like she's being raped by a poltergeist. And you're like, oh no, this isn't Spielberg. This is the guy who directed fucking Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So it kind of goes back and forth. It has these peaks and troughs of true horror, but then very Spielbergian moments. And it makes for a totally unique film.
The rescue of Carol Ann felt Spielberg, but then after this house is clean, blah, 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 because it wasn't clean, and she gets out of the bath. I was watching this film yesterday, and as she's getting attacked on the bed, the first thing she's doing is pulling her top back down.
Yeah.
Like, so the poltergeist is trying to rip her top off. There was a film, wasn't it? Was it The Entity?
Mm-hmm.
Where there was actually that scene of the ghost that, that sexually assaulted the woman in the... Mm-hmm. It's ridiculous.
Well, there's hints towards that, and you think of the tree feels like a very Spielbergian moment where I mentioned the fact that it probably gets a little bit darker than I remembered, where the tree's actually trying to eat Robbie. But you think about the guy who's like literally peels his own face off. Like there's the scene just before where, don't get me started on that fucking guy. Like he's a guest in their house as he's recording what's going on. And he's like, oh, I'm pretty hungry in the middle of the night. Goes into the fridge. He takes a chicken wing. I'm like, all right, fair enough. Then he takes what looks like a 20-ounce sirloin steak out of the fridge. And he's like, I'm going to fry this up at like 2 a.m. Who is this goddamn lunatic? But then you get like almost the comedy bit where the meat starts moving across the table. And it actually reminded me a little bit of Evil Dead 2, that kind of physical horror comedy. Yeah. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cute. And then all of a sudden, the kind of meat starts imploding almost. I'm like, oh, God, that looks gross. And I totally forgot this dude then peels his own face off. It's gross as shit. And as I said, the weirdest thing is this film, it was initially put down as it was listed as being an R-rated film in the US. Yeah. Then Spielberg kicked up a fuss and somehow convinced them to make it PG, because that was it was like PG and then R-rated in the US at the time. And somehow in the US this was a goddamn PG, which is bananas. Yeah, even in the UK,
it was always a 15 for us in the UK.
It was initially an R-rated film, because 15 didn't exist. Just after it was released, the 15 classification was released, and they actually reclassified the movie down to 15. But again, the fact that it was a PG in the States, and even a 15 here, as I say, it was just this kind of weird vibe, and this film that everyone was allowed to watch. Like, when we were younger, as I said, there was this very clear line. Some parents, like my parents, were like, you can watch what you want. So I was able to watch Friday the 13th. I was able to watch Nightmare on Elm Street, blah, blah, blah. A lot of my friends weren't. Everyone had a free pass with Poltergeist, and I'm convinced it's because at the top of the poster, you saw Steven Spielberg. And you're like, well, nothing bad can come from... He pulled the same fucking trick with Jaws. Jaws was like, oh, yeah, it's this family film everybody watches. How many people get bitten in half in Jaws?
I'm not so sure that everybody had a free rein mind, because I watched... Yeah, same with you. I watched Nightmare on Elm Street. I watched Friday the 13th. For some reason, and it's going back to that clown every time, we did not watch Poltergeist in my house. Like that didn't happen. But you've mentioned a couple of times the tree. I want to go back to the tree ripping Robbie. Like literally smashes through, picks Robbie, pulls him out. The family are outside screaming. Carol Ann gets abducted by the light upstairs. Where's the neighbours? Because if this was anywhere else, the fucking nosy neighbours around you would be going, what's going on? Gotta go and have a look.
Calls the police, something.
They are screaming on the...
I mean, they kind of go out of their way a couple of times to really highlight that their neighbour's a piece of shit, and he doesn't want to get involved. Even later on, like right at the end of the film, when Diane's literally trying to drag her neighbour in to say, you've got to help me, help my kids. And he's just like, nah, I'm not going to fuck it. He's like the worst neighbor in the world. But you can see it's a tightly packed community in, where is it, this weird place? Cuesta Verde. Yeah. It's like a planned community town, isn't it? And at times, I know it's supposed to be in California. It actually looks a bit Welsh sometimes. There's something about the rolling hills of Cuesta Verde where I'm like, God, that looks like it could be the valleys almost.
When you got when you got the graveyard on top of the mountain as well, on top of the hills as well, that feels very Welsh.
Yeah, it really does. There were just a few. Every so often, it depends on the lighting. The grass can look that little bit more kind of almost burnt, almost, with the California sun. But there are a few times when it does look like gently rolling green grass of home. So yeah, there were a few times it's like, God damn, that looks Welsh. But yeah, okay, we'll give him the one neighbor a free pass because he's a piece of shit and he doesn't want to get involved. But everyone else, nobody's calling the cops. Like you said, even if, they're not noticing the living tree eating the kid, the screaming you think would be enough, but obviously not. Obviously not. Absolutely. It really is bananas. But the thing is, I love at the start as well, it's kind of painted as this like idyllic kind of 80s American town. It's just another one of those examples. Like they do go out of that way at the start to kind of have, oh, look, it's a perfect little town. Everybody's happy there. There is the weird guy on the BMX, which he takes losing all his beers incredibly well. You think if you're carrying 20 beers and I don't know why he's riding a BMX for a start, because he's clearly, a 50-year-old man. But then those kids drive the remote control car into the bike, which makes him drop the beers. And they all go everywhere. And he just gets up like, oh, never mind.
Well, two things, right?
All those little shits.
Two things. They perfectly planned that. They've practiced that. Because the way they both drive and crisscross each other to make him fall, right? But if you're having a watch party for any, let's say the NFL, because we've watched Super Bowl together a couple of times and things like that. So if you're having you're having an NFL watch party over your house, and your friend comes in holding the one beer he rescued, they're pissing out all over your floor. If that was me and I rocked up with beer pissing all over the floor, you'd have me out, wouldn't you? There's no way you'd
be like, well, they would at least be like an inquisition. You'd be like, dude, what the fuck happened to the beers? We sent you out to get beers. You came back with one small beer that's somehow leaking. Oh, sorry. Well, why didn't you take the car? Well, I took the BMX and some kids. What, did you kill the kids? No, I just let them get away with it. Dude, you're the worst. You are the worst.
I did like the camera angle, though, because it's on the TV over their shoulder. And every now and then, you're seeing just a spritz of the beer just go over. Watching the TV. I thought that looked really good.
I know. Well, it's just like, I love all those. I've become, especially going back and watching all these films, I've become like re-enamored, as it were, with 80s small town America. And in many ways, 50s small town America, because in the 80s, they were obsessed with recreating 50s era small town America. So it's a weird mix. And the other thing is not just 80s small town America, but it's 80s bedrooms, man. 80s bedrooms are the fucking shit. I mean, Robbie's bedroom, how much Star Wars stuff are they going to throw into this film? It's unbelievable. There's like the Vader helmet. They literally wave the blanket at the camera. At one point, Carol Ann has got Luke Skywalker in her mouth for no apparent reason. Yeah. He has Han Solo's blaster. There's a fucking Star Wars poster on the wall. It was like, yeah, dude, we get it. You're friends with the guy who made Star Wars.
As well, between all of that, he had what was his name?
Alien.
No, not Alien. Sorry, the giraffe from Toys R Us. He just had a fucking pillow with what was Jeffrey
the giraffe on it?
Yeah, so something like that. So just go. Oh, so we can probably find all this shit at Toys R Us. Then is it? Is that what you're hinting at?
It's absolutely insane. I've never seen such blatant product placement in all my days. But although it does speak to, again, the tone of the film, because Robbie does have the family-friendly Star Wars poster on the wall, and then right next to it, you're talking about a kid who's what, like 8, 10, something like that, and he's got an Alien poster on the wall right next to it, which is a peculiar combination for a child of his age.
Again, 80s. I love the half and half bedroom, because you have your little sister. So half of it is lovely and pink and frilly, and the other half is just a kid's wet, like a boy's wet dream of just every toy that you could want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a weird mix, but yeah, I mean, Robbie just freaks out for most of it. I mean, Carol Ann, she's much more chill, although she's obviously more limited as an actress. Although the film does kind of hinge on her inherent sweetness. Like she wasn't an actress, and I don't think she ever actually took an acting.
We're talking about a film, Poltergeist, and as I'm looking at you, over your shoulder, your door opened on its own.
Yeah, it's pretty creepy. One of the cats did walk. And that's one of the things with this film, is just spooky-ass pets. It's, it's like you're sitting there, and then the dog, although the dog does seem to be pretty on the ball, because early doors, he's like, he's quite playful because they're a poltergeist and stuff. But then later on, when Robbie goes in the car, I'm not convinced they told the dog to go with Robbie, or if Robbie just looked back at the house and he's like, fuck this, I'm out, I'm getting in the car with Robbie. I feel like the dog made that decision.
Yeah. The dog was gone.
But no, cats do that all the time. Like, you'll be in bed, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, you wake up and one of the cats is just sitting on you, but like staring at a spot on the ceiling, and you're like, dude, stop being such a creepy little bastard. But there was one time when one of the cats was sitting on the pillow next to me, and he was looking straight up. I was like, you creepy little shit, cut it out. And I looked up, and there was a spider coming down on like a bit of its thread, web, whatever, literally down towards my face. It was only a little spider, but enough to freak the fuck out of me. at 3 o'clock in the morning.
I loved it because as I'm talking to you, your door just opened, and I can only see a corner of your door, and it's just opening. And thinking, "Fuck me, is Liam just?
Is there actually ghosts? Is there a poltergeist here?
Is Liam about to get possessed or something?" Like I was going to say, live on Zoom.
Well, that's the other thing with this film is like the classic creepy. Like, don't get me wrong, she's a very sweet little girl, but I'm not going to lie, like. Everyone seems to be very chill with her talking to the TV, talking on her imaginary phone. Like, you've got a kid. Would you be chill with that? It's like, I always think back to that scene in Paranormal Activity when they're in the bedroom and the wife gets out of bed and then the tape's on like fast forward. And it's like for 4 hours, she just stands at the end of the bed staring at her husband. I'm like, if that happened in my house, the next scene is me waking up, looking at my wife and going, nah, fuck that noise. Then the next 20 minutes is me packing her bag and then just pushing her out the door and going, no, can't deal with this, not doing with possessed wives, catch you later, goodbye. And that'd be the end of the film. Yeah. And it would just be divorce papers. So I just can't be dealing with that creepy shit.
We've had that. So it was about 2 o'clock in the morning. I had the monitor. My cat had already gone to bed, so I was going to bed as well. So I checked on the kid and he was fine. So I go to bed, I put the monitor next to the bed, I start settling in, getting down, and then the monitor turns on because it's motion and sound activated. Mm-hmm. So the monitor turns on, and then Riley sat up in his crib, because he's obviously a baby and not really talking. So he's making little gurgle noises. So I'm looking at the monitor, there's nothing there, but he is staring at something, having a conversation with it. Now, part of me was like, should I go in and see? And the other part of me was, no, let him fucking deal with it on his own because
he seems pretty chill about it. Let him talk it out. I'm not going in there. Although the one thing we do miss, and I guess it's one of the key elements of this film, certainly when you think of the poster and the classic imagery of this film, is static on a TV. And it only dawned on me when I was watching, it's like, that's not a thing anymore.
No.
Like, there's no such thing as static on TVs
no, because you don't
anymore.
have to tune your TVs in. That's
exactly. They'll never know how creepy a static TV, because it wasn't just the visuals, it's the sound, it's the flash, and they do a great job with it in this film. It's not just the screen itself; it's the impact on the rest of the film, the rest of the room. It's almost like a really low key strobe light. But like old school TVs, man, they're creepy as shit. You can almost convince yourself looking at a static image on a TV that you could see an image. Well, and even in my house,
it's the pixel art, isn't it? It's when you look at that weird art and you see a sailboat in the...
Yeah. It's the creepy version of that. I mean, the weirdest thing that ever happened to me was we'd have a TV in the living room, and in the middle room next to it, we had like a really small TV that I had my NES set up.
Yeah.
And I was playing Super Mario Brothers 3 on that TV, and the other TV was off. But somehow it picked up the image from the other TV. So you could see a ghost image of Super Mario Brothers 3 on the turned off TV in the other room. I mean, it would have been creepier if it wasn't Super Mario Brothers 3, of course. But still, it was weird as shit. But I was like, man, they'll never know how creepy fucking... If you wake up in the middle of the night and it's just... Imagine that. There's a cat staring at a spot on the wall, static TV playing. I'm just like, well, the TV's got to go. The cat's got to go. The wife should probably go just in case she's possessed too. Jesus Christ, it's just all too much.
I've heard stories, and I'm waiting for it one because Riley can't leave his room yet, thankfully. But just kids just silently stood next to your bed, just looking at you, not doing anything, just looking at you. Oh, and then you wake up and just, I'm not looking forward to that part, if I'm honest. Just like, what are you doing? Like, right, you're going to your nan's. Fuck it, you're going to your nan's.
yeah, you're all out. Just go spend the week anywhere but here. Just somewhere else, please. You're all too goddamn creepy. It's too much. But another thing with this film, when I grew up, I mentioned the fact, obviously, a lot of people watched it. But a big part of the mythos around this film when I was younger was actually the urban legends that surrounded it. And obviously, there's still a thing. Yeah. The curse of the Poltergeist movies. And we didn't actually know all the details when we were younger. And that, of course, added to it. Because, we didn't have the internet when we were younger. So it was all hearsay. People would kind of, add things, remove things, whatever. So you're like, oh, well, what's true, what's not? And the only thing anyone knew...
Before you go into the truth about it, that's still like, and you're probably going to say that goes on now. I was walking with Dave the other day, who did Total Recall with us, and I told him we were going to do Poltergeist, and he said, "Didn't the little girl get murdered?" So that
classic.
Carol Ann got murdered, and you look it up, and well, no, actually,
no, she didn't.
I heard that she got murdered and stuff. But
yeah.
But it wasn't, was it? It was she was misdiagnosed with something.
Yeah, she died of cardiac arrest at 12, which is ridiculous. But it was due to a misdiagnosed congenital intestinal stenosis, which is basically an intestinal blockage for us laymen's. But I mean, like you said, most of the stories were built around Carol Ann, or Heather O'Rourke is her real name. But there was like so much more to it, because I mean, what was it? 4 cast members died within 6 years of the first film being released. So Dana, who was played by Dominic Dunn, so she's the older sister. She died at 22 after being strangled by her ex-boyfriend.
Yeah, the same year this film was released, 1982.
Was it 20? Was it literally the same year?
Yeah,
there was released.
She got murdered in 82. She was murdered in 82.
Yeah. Well, Julian Beck, who isn't in this film, but everyone will know as the rather evil Reverend Henry Kane.
I've never seen Poltergeist 2, so I've never seen any of a Poltergeist, because I've only ever watched this once. I've never seen the others. So I always thought it was an Indian burial ground, but that's actually more prominent for the second film, isn't it? Not this one.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I mean, when I use that Simpsons quote at the start, that episode of Treehouse of Horror, which is one of my favorite episodes, that kind of combines Poltergeist 1, Poltergeist 2, and the Amityville horror all into one kind of spooky house situation. But that is the thing. A lot of the, I guess, iconography of the Poltergeist series, like when we said, oh, we're going to do Poltergeist, a lot of people mentioned, the first thing they brought up was Reverend Henry Kane. And I think a lot of people thinking back assume that he's in the first film, but he's not. He's very much Poltergeist 2 and Poltergeist 3. And even though the second film, I don't think is fantastic, a lot of people love the second film. Like one of my friends I was talking to last night, he said it's his favorite horror film of all time. So it's one of those, like, it's, what's that, sorry?
I'm going to have to watch it.
Oh, yeah, you should totally watch it. Don't watch the third one. The third one's rubbish. But Reverend Henry Kane in part 2, he died in 1985 at 60, sadly, of cancer. I believe he already had it while filming was commencing. Will Sampson, who played the good spirit Taylor in the sequel, he died in 1987 at 53 due to complications from heart and lung transplant. So, of course, it's not as mysterious as the urban legend suggested, especially with, Heather O'Rourke, in people say, oh, she was murdered, this, and that. Her death obviously was bizarre because she was so young. But a lot of them, well, 2 of them at least, are much more explainable. But I guess that, if you want to hang your hat on the first 2, I suppose, with the 2 sisters dying at such young age and in such horrible ways, such, strange ways, I suppose, in many respects, it does add to the kind of mystique of the film. And I know that can sound a little bit cold-hearted, but growing up, that definitely had an impact. And it wasn't just, Poltergeist the movie, it was Poltergeist the movie with the urban legend around it and everything. And that was a massive part of it, for sure.
There was a gentleman in this film as well. I can't picture him. A guy named Lou Perryman, he played somebody named Pugsley in this film.
Pugsley?
Yeah.
Okay.
I can't remember the character Pugsley. I think he might have been one of the guys who was doing the pool. Maybe.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Well, the one who isn't Billy.
Maybe, yeah, it has to be.
Yeah, because there's only 2 of them. There's a guy with the moustache, and then there was Billy from Predator.
Okay. Well, not Billy then.
He
died, died in 2009 at 67 years of age. He was killed with an axe.
It was not him then, because that guy doing the pool would have been Yeah. Oh, okay. Maybe. Sorry, I keep butting him. I do apologize.
No, I'm just saying. So whoever Pugsley was from this film, and again, it's not like I'm not going in the curse of Poltergeist as they've already said, but another character, and he died years later. Like he died in 2009. But the fact he was killed with an axe. So 2 people who were in this film were murdered as well.
Yeah. As you say, it's obviously a coincidence. I'm not suggesting for a second that there's actually a curse associated with this franchise. But yeah, there is some strange stuff going on, and it just adds to it that the film is based on poltergeist and ghosts. But and it's such a weird thing, isn't it? Because this film, I feel like it absolutely cornered the term poltergeist. Like if you say the term ghost, I don't think some people might think of the film with Patrick Swayze and but for the most part, if someone just says ghost, you just imagine a ghost. But now, if somebody says poltergeist, I think everybody just thinks of this film. you don't really, Poltergeist doesn't really get a mention in most films. Usually it's like, oh, it's a ghost story, or this house is haunted in the more traditional sense. But in terms of an actual poltergeist, it feels like everybody is it's just this series and that's it.
And because of this film as well, right? If I was doing the dishes or I was doing anything and I turned back round and all of a sudden my chairs are stacked high on the table, I'm out of there. I ain't fucking sticking around.
Well, the parents are very cool about it. But then, Mum, Diane, I assume she is smoking a J in bed. I mean, she's pretty chill about most things. I mean, let's be clear. To bring it back to Billy, in a very 80s move, they're the pool cleaners. They are very loudly and very clearly hitting on their 16-year-old daughter in her school outfit. And they are being leery as fuck. And I was like, oh, well, it's the 80s. They're the pool cleaners. That's what the fuck they do. They keep sending their kids back to bed, even though there's clearly poltergeists in the house. They don't give a fuck. When the ghosts actually, like you say, they start putting the chairs up and she starts getting pulled across the floor, anyone else would be like, dude, I'm out of here immediately. She seems pretty pleased about it. And the only reason I can assume is because she's stoned half the time. I mean, dude, we're talking about a woman who was going to flush a budgie down the toilet. Like, what the hell was that about? And she did it with such confidence. I didn't even notice it at first until my wife was like, dude, she like fucking gonna flush a budgie down the toilet? That's insane. That is insane.
I love how it jumped into Carol Ann giving her like licorice, giving the budgie licorice to be buried with. What the fuck?
Yeah. Again, her being very cute and stuff, but Diane's she's a goddamn psycho.
I do love the fact that she's smoking the joint, and it's because it's the 80s. You're hinting that it's hitting you hard. There's a lot of coughing and stuff as they're talking. But I love the fact then you've got Craig T. Nelson trying to roll his own one at the front of the bed, totally failing in doing it, so asking his wife to do it. And there's just residue of weed just left on the bed where he's just like, he just couldn't do it.
Yeah, and like they don't even like, she kind of like half puts out when Robbie comes into the bedroom. But it's like, dude, if you've ever smoked weed or been around it before, it absolutely stinks. Yeah. There's no way that room doesn't absolutely buzz of weed. And it's like, oh, mum and dad are getting fucking baked again.
The kids are getting a contact high from it as well. They've got to be like, do you know what I mean?
There's got to be something going on. I just don't like in these films now when I go back and watch it. And the parents are like notably younger than me. Like at that time.
Yeah,
it's especially Craig T. Nelson, who I think always looked like a 50-year-old man, but in this, I think he's like 36. I'm like, oh man, that's like 3 years younger than me. I don't care for it. I don't care for one bit.
I'm not a huge fan of that anymore because I think about it now. Like, I think about I'm older than my dad was at certain periods of my life when I was thinking, wow, try and do this with Riley like my dad would, and I'm like, I'm older than my dad was.
Yeah. I don't like doing those maths at all. It's very upsetting. Speaking of maths, actually, one thing that surprised me going back to this was when I think of this film, one of the major characters I think of is Tangina, played by Zelda Rubinstein.
Zelda Rubinstein, who I think we've already said, but I always, since knowing about this film, I always thought her name in this film was Zelda.
Yeah, and the thing is, I mean, I don't think that her name is actually ever spoken in this film.
It's not.
But if it is, I missed it because I was like, is it pronounced Tangina or Tangina? I assume it's Tangina.
She just appears out of nowhere as well. I know you.
It's over. Well, that's what I mean. I thought of this as being like she plays a massive role in this film. Yeah. She doesn't show up until like an hour and 10 into this film. She shows up. She fucks around for like 20 minutes. She says this house is clean. It's not.
Lie.
And she fucking bounces. Massive lie. Yeah. And that's it. And she's gone. And, you know...
She only hinted about coming, like...
excuse me.
The therapist or whoever... what did we say her name was? The
psychotherapist? Or
Dr. Martha Lesh. She's more the one... Because I always would have thought that Zelda was the one that has the emotional attachment to the family. But it's Dr. Lesh that does. She has the emotional attachment to the family. She gives... Diane a hug and is like, I'm gonna bring help, and all of a sudden, she gives that lovely speech, you know, when she's with Diana, and again, it's a very Spielberg moment when it's almost like again the Jerry Goldsmith score really comes in heavy. The lighting, it's very soft focus on the face. It feels like a very old-fashioned ghost story in many regards in those moments.
And like you said, those are where you're building up that kind of relationship between the family and the members of that team, but her in particular. And you see Zelda, she just kind of pops in. She's all very dramatic, and that's it.
I love it because she says, I'm bringing back help. And help comes in the form of a 4'2" woman who says, I'm psychic. You know, I'm going to walk around the house. And the way she walks around the house as well, with like her arms like crossed and things as she's walking around. It's ridiculous.
She makes an impact, though.
But I would be with Craig T. Nelson. I would be thinking, what the fuck's going on? And I realise I've seen a lot of shit at the moment. Like, if I open my kid's door, the bed is still spinning. But you've brought like a 4'2", and I'm not like attacking her stature. But like, I don't understand.
It feels like you are. It feels like you're heavily.
I don't understand what this woman's gonna.
You're suggesting it's like, well, she's clearly bullshit. She's 4'2".
Well, she fucking lied. I'm going back to the fact she lied.
Well, it's strange because they do so much to kind of establish her credentials. Like you say, Craig T. Nelson, when she's like, oh, she can't read my mind, but then she clearly does because she's upstairs and she knows everything she says is correct. She's like, oh, it's this room. It's, oh, we can go through. She's on the other side. It's bizarre because everything Tangina says is correct and comes to fruition.
Yeah.
So when she says this house is clean, you have no reason to not believe her because everything she said has come true. And she seems to be totally legit, despite her tiny stature, which you're clearly very upset about. So up until that point, in that 20, 30-minute spell where she's heavily involved in the narrative, it's like you think, yeah, okay, Tangina's come in, she saves the day, they've got Carol Ann back. Yes, they're all covered in Ghostbusters 2-style goop for some reason, but that's just a fucking thing. But at that point, in fairness, it's genius in many regards. It's not explained, but it is genius because if you were watching that, say, in the cinema in 82, rather than on a DVD or Blu-ray or whatever now, and you can see that there's 20 minutes left, you're like, well, what the fuck's happening in this last 20 minutes? Surely something else is going to happen. If you're in the cinema, that's like an hour and 30 into this film. Most horror films are usually on for 90 minutes. You're probably like, all right, Tangina saves the day, Carol Ann's back, They'll quietly move out. Everything's fine. And then you get a legitimately batshit. It was almost like Tobe Hooper was like, hey, dude, man, fuck. My name is on this poster. The last 20 minutes is going to be a Tobe Hooper film. And the last 20 minutes really is a Tobe. All that kind of Spielbergian whimsy goes out of the window in the last 20 minutes. And it is mayhem. And I actually think it's maybe the best 20 minutes of the film because it really does ramp up the horror at that point. The whole the whole concept of it knows what you're afraid of, it totally turns that up to 11 in the last 20 minutes. And you get like Diane trying to get to the door, and she's, for some reason, afraid of giant spider skeletons that roar like a lion. I mean, sure, why not?
All it needed was flames out of his mouth at that point. So I didn't want to interrupt you then, but I want to go back to how different our minds work, because you said when they came out of the ceiling, they were in the Ghostbusters 2 ectoplasm. When I saw it, I instinctively went to, oh my God, it looks like they've just been born, and that's some weird amniotic fluid. Just, do you know what I mean? That's what my mind...
I think that's probably what they were actually going for. Yeah. I really do think that's what they were going for, but I couldn't shift away from the Ghostbusters 2 group. It's the same color. It looks like the same consistency. It reminded me of especially the stuff in Dana's bath. You know, when she's pouring the water and then it turns into the goop. Just remind me of that.
Don't let Egon Spengler sleep with it. Dirty, dirty man.
Dirty, dirty Egon. Can't be trusted. But yeah, I really think that last 20 minutes that's when it really feels like, you know, we were talking about, that Spielberg shift in AI, where it's like the first half of the film is very much Kubrick, and the second half is very much Spielberg. For most of this film, it feels like a combination of the two. But that last 20 minutes, to me at least, it really felt like a legitimate Tobe Hooper horror film. And I mean, you think about like one of those great, it's a bizarre trope of the 80s, but having skeletons, you've got to have great skeletons in these movies. And this has some of the best. When she slides down into the unfinished pool and all the bodies come up, and like you say, Craig T. Nelson, or we keep calling him Craig T. Nelson, Steve. Steve has his like freak out where it's like, you moved the head, so I didn't leave the body. You know, all that stuff that sense of panic when she's trying to run back upstairs. She's trying to get the neighbors to help, but they're having none of it. The lights are going. There's dead bodies everywhere. I'm like, holy shit, man.
Only one neighbor, mind. Of all the houses around, still only one neighbor they're trying to get to help them. That's what I couldn't grasp. But it did look like with the skeletons that they just borrowed some from like George Lucas's ILM production or something, because they were
supposedly
from Indiana Jones, weren't they? They look like the kind of skeletons.
Well, the rumor for this film is that they actually used real skeletons. Oh. Again, I'm not sure if that just adds to the legend of this film, but supposedly they were like, it costs more money to get props in than it would for us to use real human skeletons. So that is one of the rumors about this film, is that those scenes towards the end when you have them all in the pool and then they're all coming up through the floor, is that they're actually real skeletons, which I would love to believe. But it becomes a legitimately insane haunted house for those last 15, 20 minutes when, as I said, you get even like right down to like when the daughter Dana shows up, and she's like, what the fuck's going on? She's got like a hickey on her neck, like, for no apparent reason. And then she's well, she's been up to no good.
But I loved all the hints with her as well, that she was a little bit promiscuous. There was a couple of hints here and there, but the bigger hint was, right, we're all going to stay down the Holiday Inn. Oh, yeah, I know that place. What? So, do you mind if I go? So, like, quick change the subject. Like, she's gone through a couple of hotel rooms down there and just had a bit of fun, do you know?
You think Diane might be a little bit more kind of heavy-handed with, be careful, kind of, with the messaging, because in this film, like, Diane's supposed to be 32. And her daughter, Dana, is supposed to be 16. So, like, she would have had her when she was, like, 16, 17 years old. But I think...
There's a novelization.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Sorry, well, feel free. Sorry.
No, go for it. Go for it.
There's a novelization that hints that Diane is actually the second marriage, and she's Dana's stepmom from Steve.
Yeah.
So, but sorry, I totally just jumped in there, so I do apologize.
No, it's absolutely fine. It's absolutely fine. But no, like, I think they're actually only 6 years apart. The actual actress. So,
well, she was 22.
So Jo Beth Williams, who played Diana, I think she was only 6 years older than Dominic Dunn at the time. So, yeah, one of those weird ones. You used to get that all the time, especially, you think of all those high school films where, Grease, where everyone's like fucking 42 and they're supposed to be playing 17-year-olds. It was a done thing in the 70s and 80s.
I love the house as well. Like, is no question the fact that the house just implodes and just disappears?
And also, just speak, like, how good does that look now?
Yeah, it looks
amazing. I mean, what they did, they ran it like 62 frames instead of the traditional 20 or whatever it is, and they actually built the house and then sucked it in on itself, so it kind of collapsed in itself. But you watch it now, and you're like, that still looks really good, really effective. Well, like, I should know how long ago it was. It was, released the year I was born, so 39 years ago, which I don't like to admit. But that was one of those. Most of the effects I thought in this film, like, you think of Diane when she's trying to get, again, in the same kind of section of the film, when she's trying to get to the room where Carol Ann is, and the hallway keeps getting longer and longer. And of course, it's done with perspective and stuff, but that still looks fantastic. The only scene I actually thought which didn't look great was when they go into the room and everything's floating. It kind of has a very Twilight Zone kind of vibe to it, that scene in particular. And that was one of the few scenes that kind of took me out of the film. But for the most part, I was in.
The practical effects in this did look really good, and a lot of the special effects look good as well. But I'd agree with you. When the thing started going up to their face and moving around, bro, I tell you what looked really great was the record with the compass went onto and made it play music. I thought that looked fantastic. I thought that looked really good.
It looked okay, but everything about it just felt like a bit of a show-off scene. For the time, that would have been very impressive special effects. And it just kind of took me out of the film, whereas you compare it to, say, something which is very Inception. And we mentioned the fact that it's quite a disturbing scene, because it's almost as if the Poltergeist is trying to rape Diane in many regards. But the way she kind of ends up crawling up the wall and then along the ceiling. Yeah, that looked good. Again, technically, that scene is absolutely fantastic and super effective. There's some really, really good stuff in this film from both the practical special effects and, I guess they are all practical special effects. But yeah, from start to finish, right up to the point where the house disappears, it really does hold up better than most films would from like 1982.
Of everything, you said it took you out of the film, like that scene. The one thing that really took me out of the film, and I know it's not her fault because she was 6 years old, was the ADR. The fact that they had to redub her a lot because there's scenes where she's talking, but her mouth clearly isn't moving. Probably because she didn't want to speak, or she cocked up, or well, but she's 6 years old, so it's not her fault.
And she's never acted.
And she's never acted before, so it took me out of the. It took me out of the film. Like the scene where she's got the helmet on and they push it on the thing, and she's saying, "I'm hungry," but her mouth isn't moving.
Yeah. There are a few bits like that, and I think there's the bit at the end. Well, not just before it goes truly bonkers, when they get Diane and Caroline back from the other side. And they put them both in the bath, and they finally wake up, and there's this moment of kind of joy. And Caroline or Heather O'Rourke kind of half is like looking at the camera and stuff, and she looks a bit confused at like, what should I be doing? So there are a few moments, but for the most part, like she's such a cute, adorable little girl kind of thing. You can see why they picked her for the film. I think Drew Barrymore was actually up for the role initially.
Yeah.
But because Spielberg was filming E.T. at the same time, I think E.T. came out like within a week of this film. He said, she would be a better fit for E.T., which obviously worked out well because that was one of the biggest films of all time.
It hints to Drew Barrymore's childhood as well, doesn't it? Because she had a reputation as a child, did Drew Barrymore, where she auditioned for this, but they wanted somebody more angelic. So they went with O'Rourke. But then her audition for this is what's got her the role in E.T.
Yeah, which worked out for. But in fairness, I mean, when you talk about angelic, that is the one thing we would say about Heather O'Rourke. Like in this role, she does look absolutely angelic. She really does. She looks absolutely adorable. And like that scene at the start is really establishing that because she doesn't actually have a huge amount to say. You know, she's on all the posters and she delivers the "they're here" line. But other than her little speech at the start, when where the budgie is saved from the toilet and they put it in the box and stuff, and she gives a little speech, it's all geared around her being very innocent, very sweet kind of thing, and it totally works. So I think they got the casting right. Heather O'Rourke for this, Drew Barrymore for E.T. I think everyone was a winner in that regard. Obviously, didn't work out in the long run for reasons we've already mentioned. But for this film in particular, I think the casting was absolutely bang on.
Plus, E.T. sucked. Just putting it out there.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of E.T. No. I love Spielberg. I was never a fan of E.T. So don't go expecting well, I don't know. Maybe one day it would be worth us rewatching it because perhaps I would feel differently about it. I'm literally convinced to myself we should totally do E.T. now.
No, I'll go there.
Excuse me.
You totally shut me down a couple of weeks ago. So if we have to watch E.T. on this podcast, we're watching Super Mario Bros.
Oh my God. Oh, okay. The thing is, I can tell you, Mario Bros. Is definitely shit. I've got a funny feeling if I'm watching it with a more critical eye, E.T. is a well-made movie. It's not my cup of tea because I didn't like E.T. and I just never attached to it when I was younger. But I suspect it's going to be very well made.
Yeah, it's just
Super Mario Brothers, however.
I can't watch it. If I have to watch it, as you say, through a critical eye, I'm going to make you watch Mario Brothers.
Jeez, that feels almost cruel and unusual. I love the fact that you're like, I'm not watching E.T., but I'd love to watch Super Mario Brothers. That does officially make you quite insane, but it's fine. It's fine.
Right. Not Mario Brothers. We'll stick with the 80s and we'll go Garbage Pail Kids.
Oh, no, fuck that. Fuck that. I watched a trailer for that recently. That film's a piece of shit. It's the worst.
It is fun.
Well, yeah. I mean, maybe it would be. Okay, we're getting off the rails here. So usually at this point we go over to facts. Before we get there, I just want to add one extra section this week. This is hopefully a one-off. It won't become a regular occurrence. It's a correction section. Matt Baker got in touch with us. First, he confirmed that he thoroughly enjoyed the podcast. So thank you, Matt Baker. And I got to be honest, Matt Baker, it kind of sounds like a made-up name, but that's what I said on Facebook. So Matt Baker it is. And apologies, Matt, for saying your name sounds made up. But we said last week, and I thought I was having a great idea about the concept of a Evil Dead musical. I was like, it could be a musical, it could be a stage show. Why hasn't anyone done that?
It's a musical.
It's totally a musical. It's been running since 2003. I've seen a little bit of it online. So yeah, it totally exists, and it wasn't an idea I came up with. So I just wanted to put that down as a correction for this week. So I don't want to dwell on it. Don't go typing it. I've already admitted I was wrong. Fucking hell. So you got to get busy. You're busy with the facts now. You've got to get to the facts, not corrections.
I would just like to say that the missing of Evil Dead the musical was all Liam. I totally on board that there was a musical. I just want to go back.
Yeah, I mean, you don't need to double down on it, motherfucker. All right. So anyway, facts, dude.
We have had that section before. We usually call this shit we missed.
Oh, do we? Okay. Well, I've even fucked that up. So
Poltergeist door just closed. Your door just closed with nobody.
Well, I clearly got ghosts and poltergeists and stuff. Don't worry about it. It's fine. It's fine. I'm not worried about it. You shouldn't be worried about it. It's no problem.
I want to carry on this podcast. You can't get possessed, all right? Just say it. All right? Right, so fucking hell, this show feels like it's going off the rails. Right, move on to facts. Heather O'Rourke kept the pet goldfish Carol Ann has in the film. I'm surprised the amount of food she was given that thing that it survived the film.
I know, right? Jesus. That should have been dead long ago.
Both of the terrors that plagued Robbie came from Steven Spielberg's own fears as a child, a fear of clowns and a tree outside his window. Like, yeah, I mean, I suppose if there's a tree right outside your window and with lightning and stuff like that, the shadows it gives off can...
No, I get it. Trees can be a little bit creepy, especially, like you said, if you're like a little kid, it's outside the door, outside the window, sorry, outside the door. Yeah, that'd be pretty fucking freaky. Yeah, I can totally get on board with that.
During all the horrors that preceded while filming Poltergeist, only one scene really scared Heather O'Rourke. It's the one in which she had to hold onto the headboard while a wind machine blew toys into the closet behind her. The young actress fell apart. Producer Steven Spielberg stopped everything, took her in his arms and said that she would not have to do that scene again. So I love the fact that of everything that's going on, it was the fact that she was being blown by a wind machine is the one that freaked her out.
Yeah, I guess she kind of gets it like she was being sucked into the cupboard or something. I don't know. But yeah, fair enough.
At around an hour and 35 minutes, when Robbie is being strangled, the clown's arms become extremely tight and Robin started to choke. When he screamed out, "I can't breathe," director Steven Spielberg and Tobe Hooper thought that the boy was ad-libbing and just instructed him to look at the camera. When Spielberg saw Robin's face turning purple, he ran over and removed the clown's arms from his neck. Yeah. I love it. Oh, he's just ad-libbing. He's just doing well. Yeah. Hang on, he's turning purple. He's turning purple.
And you think you're scared of clowns? I mean, Jesus Christ! I mean, you know, Robbie or God, what was the name of the actor who played him?
Oliver Robbins.
Yeah, he's got a real reason to be scared of goddamn clowns. One almost killed him.
I wonder if they asked him if he wanted to take that clown home with him.
Yeah, do you want to take the... No, I don't want to take the fucking murderous clown. Are you out of your mind? Jesus Christ. She got to get the goldfish. Why am I getting the murderous clown? Ridiculous.
Spielberg hired Tobe Hooper after being impressed with his work on Texas Chainsaw Massacre. James Caron at the time. So James Caron was Craig Nelson's boss. We've already named him. I forgot his name already. Steve. James Caron was Steve's boss. So he was the spokesman for Pathmark supermarkets. And he received hate mail from people saying that they would never shop there again because of his character's treatment of the Freelings. Well,
there you go. There you go. What goes on screen stays on screen. People do not forget.
I love how people can't differentiate that. This fucker, built that house on an Indian burial ground, which we found out in number 2. So I don't want to shop at the supermarket that he's promoting.
Yeah. I think that's completely reasonable. Completely reasonable.
I mean, yes, I agree. Attack Subway for that Jared Fogle thing because he's a bad man. But this guy was acting.
This guy was acting. Yes, I would suggest this is quite different from sexual offender Zach, whatever the hell his name was from Subway. But yeah, fair enough.
Terrible.
What's his name? Well, not Zach.
It was Jared Fogle.
Jared Fogle, sorry. I just know I got it wrong. My
bad. So this actually took me out in the film as well. I didn't mention it while we were talking about the film because I knew I had a fact for it. Sorry. But at around 34 minutes, there's a jump cut. So the scene where Diane is explaining to Stephen about the feeling you get when a spirit pulls you across the floor, because she starts going on about how it feels in her stomach. And then it goes straight to them standing outside the neighbour's house.
I actually rewound it because I was like, wait, is the movie jumped?
Yeah.
And I was like, because it's such a clumsy cut. You literally cannot miss it. It's so clumsy.
So the scene jumps in mid-sentence to the scene where they were both on the neighbor's doorstep, again in mid-sentence. The reason for the cut was because in the original scene, Steven says how he hates Pizza Hut. The scene was edited rather crudely after Pizza Hut took offense.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're trying to sell pizzas, I suppose. I can't believe they listen to them. But you look at how much kind of product placement is in this film, you're like, all right, fair play. We don't want to upset Pizza Hut.
I love the fact that of all of it as well, the Ritz crackers. Like when he goes to get a midnight snack before he pulls the fridge, I'll just grab a Ritz cracker. And the Ritz
crackers were completely reasonable. I don't have an issue. Even the chicken leg, it's the goddamn rump steak.
But all I could think about is he put his hand in, pulled out a Ritz cracker. That wasn't sealed. That wasn't folded over. They're going to be stale, dude.
They are going to be stale. They haven't thought it through, have they?
No.
They're just thinking about that sweet Ritz paycheck. That's it.
Oh, dude, they were just given a year's supply of Ritz crackers. That's all that happened.
Oh, that'd be rubbish, wouldn't it?
So in one scene, Steve and Diane Freeling are in their bedroom, and the movie Guy Named Joe is playing on their television. Oh, sorry, the movie A Guy Named Joe.
Yeah.
I had no grammar on there then at all. I didn't know what was going on. Not only is this movie about a dead person who is still hanging around, as the spirits in the film are, but Steven Spielberg remade A Guy Named Joe 7 years later, as always.
Yeah, not a great film. Not a great film.
So we've already said that Heather O'Rourke was chosen over Drew Barrymore. Two of the film's cast members were subsequently murdered. So Dominic Dunn, who played Dana, was strangled by a former boyfriend on October the 30th, 1982. And then the guy that played Pugsley, who we can't picture in this film, was killed by an axe in 2009. Yeah. There was a DirecTV commercial in 2008 that affectionately parodied the film. Craig T. Nelson reprised the role of Steve Freeling, complaining to Carol Ann and the audience that the static on the TV set is just bad cable reception, and quips, "Not getting rid of cable. That's going to come back to haunt me." Heather O'Rourke's family were pleased with the ad for keeping her memory alive.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool.
That's pretty much all I got, because there was a lot of facts, but they were all pretty much.
There's so much. I mean, most of the ones I've got, you've already covered. I mean, I think we already mentioned the real skeletons being cheap and props. Stephen King was actually asked to write the script, but supposedly his publisher asked for too much money. Zelda Rubinstein, despite being seemingly the perfect fit for this film, was screen tested 4 times before she got the role, and she was actually only on set for 6 days. So again, her involvement, despite the fact that everyone associates her with this film, she's not in it for that long, and she wasn't actually filming for that long either. I think I mentioned it earlier, Diane's fear of the giant spider with a skeleton space and a lion drawer. Well, usually Spielberg traditionally worked with Universal at the time, but for this film, he was working with MGM. And if you go back to listen to it, it's actually the MGM lion's famous roar used in that scene. So when she's being roared at, because I was like, God, that roar goes on for a while. It's legitimately the MGM lion draw. So I thought that was quite interesting. That's pretty much it for facts. Legacy. Again, we mentioned the sequels earlier. You haven't seen them. I know Poltergeist 3 isn't much liked by anyone, but Poltergeist 2, despite being not critically beloved, it does seem to have a huge number of fans. And it says, especially amongst my friends, I think a lot of people, and a big part of that obviously is the Reverend himself. They just think of that film and that character in particular when they think of Poltergeist. So, I think 2 out of 3 isn't a bad batting average for a horror trilogy, as it were. There's obviously the 2015 remake, which really on paper sounded pretty good. I mean, it's produced by Sam Raimi. It stars Sam Rockwell, who we both love. Yeah. But it's just, it's not terrible. It's just like so many of these remakes. It's just okay. It's just about okay. It's like a 5 out of 10.
I've never seen it. There's also, which is quite ironic considering the legacy section, Poltergeist: The Legacy, a TV show from 96 to 99, which was an anthology show. Really had nothing. It was like, because they did a Friday the 13th TV show, which was just about them collecting horror artifacts, so possessed artifacts.
They did it for a lot of these things. Yeah. They did the same with Nightmare on Elm Street. There's a TV show where he was kind of like loosely linked to it, rather than it being a Freddy show. You know?
He was the Crypt Keeper essentially in that. He was just
a lot of these did follow the Crypt Keeper kind of format.
But Poltergeist: The Legacy, was literally just about them going around, looking at haunted houses, basically known as legacy houses. So But it ran for quite a while. It ran for 4 seasons, 89 episodes. So that's.
I never watched that episode of that.
No, I never saw it. It's probably one of those ones that shows on the horror channel now, like 2:00 in the morning.
The only other thing I think outside those, as I said, like, in terms of the movie's legacy, is obviously we already mentioned the urban legends surrounding this film, which very much live on. But also that famous quote, "They're here." I think it's kind of up there with those the most memorable horror movie quotes. Like, with as a teaser for this film, we just put up "They're here" and that's it. And I think everyone you see that, you're like, oh, it's Poltergeist. It's definitely Poltergeist. You see a static TV now. Well, you don't see them anymore, obviously. But I think if you did see one, the first thing that pops into my head is Poltergeist. Totally is. Yeah.
I want to test. I want to test. What was his name? Math? Did you say? Who was it? Math who corrected you?
Oh, Math. M-A-F-F. Math. Okay.
I do apologize if I said. I want to test him then and ask if there's a Poltergeist the musical.
Poltergeist the musical. Yeah, we've somehow missed that. Jesus Christ, we probably have. So I'm going to keep my mouth shut. Speaking of music, though, the soundtrack section. I mean, one of the real reasons that this movie works, and I really do think this movie works. I think it's better than I remember. I think it's very well made, largely well acted. But a massive part of it is Jerry Goldsmith's like equal parts horror and sense of wonderment that he gets across through the score. And this is a guy, I don't feel like he gets the same level of attention as the likes of Williams and Zimmer and Elfman. But this is a guy who scored many of my favorite films. This guy did, The Burbs, Gremlins, First Blood, Total Recall. Obviously, we did a few weeks ago. Yep. He did Mr. Baseball with Tom Selleck. Mr. Baseball. I fucking love it. You're looking at me. You haven't seen that film.
I've seen it. Tom Selleck.
Oh, you have.
Man to play baseball.
Oh, I love that film.
I've seen all the 80s ones. Bull Durham, Major League.
I loved that 80s baseball film. He did Speed, and another film which we'll end up doing this podcast sooner rather than later is Inner Space. So this guy really did score a lot of my, favorite films from the 80s. He also did Star Trek V: The Final Frontier, but we'll forgive him for that. But the score was actually up for one of them. The film itself was up for 3 Oscars, and one of them was for Best Score. And for all 3 Oscars, it lost out, funny enough, to E.T. So Spielberg was just cleaning house this year. So, the film, presented by Spielberg lost out to the film, which really was and definitively directed by Spielberg. So, it is what it is. But the only other one I've got left now is video games. I couldn't find anything. There are obviously video games with Poltergeist in them, but there was no Poltergeist video game. In terms of if you were going to make one based on this film, I think the main thing is...
Can I cut in before you...
Yeah, go for it, mate.
Because I will just say that I have no idea. So instead of you saying that and then me just going, blah, 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 I have no idea.
Okay.
I wouldn't know how to make a game around this. I wouldn't know what to do. I wouldn't even recommend Naughty Dog at this point. I'm out.
Yeah, this isn't one for Naughty Dog. I mean, the immediate thing I think of is, because obviously a big part of it is the scares and it is the horror, but so much of it is the mood, the sense of place. As I said, this isn't all horror. There is that sense of wonderment. There is that sense of kind of like perfect slice of Americana. And the best way to capture that would be a kind of traditional walking simulator, I think. And, you think of some of the games like The Vanishing of Ethan Carter by the Astronauts, Gone Home, which was developed by Fulbright. Firewatch is another one, which has a great sense of tone and, has that kind of mix of almost, I don't want to say it's not supernatural, but, kind of strange things going on with the kind of more mundane of everyday life. That was by Campo Santo. But I thought the best example...
I'm nodding at you, but I haven't heard of any of these.
Well, out of all these, I think the one which captures it most, and I don't think there are any supernatural elements, but in terms of going to a house, exploring it, building up the narrative, there's a game called What Remains of Edith Finch by Giant Sparrow. It's an absolutely fantastic game. And while this would be, obviously, it would have a faster pace and you would have to kind of change things up for the more horror elements, I think having that, and again, that doesn't have additional characters, just one girl exploring a house. You would need other characters. That would be part of the narrative, of course. But I think combining everyday Americana with a haunted house, but the kind of ordeal of still having to live there in many regards, I think that'd be quite an interesting way to go about it. So basically what I'm saying is not Naughty Dog.
As you were talking about it, I actually thought, we could actually do it as a game like Luigi's Mansion.
Yeah, well, if you're going to do the arcade game version, then we do Luigi's Mansion for sure. But starring Zelda Rubinstein.
Oh my God, yeah.
With a vacuum cleaner. Yeah, I think that's the way.
And tennis balls, baseballs labeled 1 and 2. They could be.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. She throws a ghost. Okay, so as usual at this point, the two big questions, the only questions, of course. What's your rating, and would you recommend this movie to others?
Okay, so this is definitely not nostalgia linked for me because I've watched it once. I did have fun with this film. It was an enjoyable watch. But it's a middle of the road film for me. And I know you hate it, but it's 2.5. It is 2.5 out of 5. It is just straight down the middle. It's done quite well. I do like the effects and all that, but there's a lot of questions around it as well, like the neighbors thing, like just things that I can't kind of get past. But all in all, it's all right. It is a 2.5. I don't have much of an attachment to it, so it wouldn't be one of the ones where I would go, you got to go out and watch it. So it probably wouldn't be one that I would highly recommend to others. Not saying that it's not a great film, and if it was brought up in conversation, I would probably say I've seen it, I didn't mind it. It's a middle of the road film, yeah, give it a go. But I wouldn't be shouting from the rooftops for this film now.
Well, incredibly harsh, I think. The 2.5 rating aside, of course, I think this is comfortably a 4-star film. I would absolutely recommend it to others. I think it totally stands up. I think it's a better film than I actually remembered. And like yourself, despite, I mentioned the fact that there was the narrative surrounding it when I was younger, about the whole urban legend and everything. It wasn't a film I watched much when I was a kid. I think, like yourself, I think I only watched it once when I was younger. I watched it once again in maybe my very early 30s because I hadn't seen it for so long. And now I'm watching it again maybe 7 or 8 years later. And each time I've watched it, I think I've liked it more and more. And I think a big part of it is the fact that it does feel unique, that it does sit in this weird realm of kind of family-friendly horror, despite the fact that it's not particularly family-friendly. It's built around a family, but I think it all comes down to the Spielberg influence. It totally has that Spielberg sense of magic, which no one else can recreate. It's very much a Spielberg thing. I guess the closest thing to it would be, what's his name, who did the Star Trek reboot and the Star Wars films. What's his name?
J.J.
Abrams. He's kind of copied him. But he's no Spielberg. Certainly no Spielberg in his prime. But you got to think this is, Spielberg at the peak of his powers. I mean, he's making this at the same time as E.T. He's coming off the back of Jaws, of Close Encounters of the Third Kind. This is Spielberg very much in the midst of one of the great cinematic runs, and he imbues this with that unique sense of Spielberg magic while attaching it to a very traditional Tobe Hooper horror film. And I'm not convinced there's a film like it, which captures that unique middle ground of being both genres. And I'm calling almost Spielberg a genre unto himself, as it were. But I think for that reason, it has a special place in my heart. And as I said, I think it absolutely holds up.
So what you're trying to say is it's all right.
I think it's really fucking good. I legitimately... to the point where I'm going to have to go back and rewatch Poltergeist 2, which I suspect isn't going to be as good as this.
I definitely want to watch Poltergeist 2 now, but I'm wondering if we save that for the podcast.
Maybe we could do it next Halloween. Yeah.
Maybe that's something we can discuss. I don't think, aside from Karate Kid, we've differentiated as much on one of these for our scores.
Oh, in terms of opinions. No, we usually kind of fall somewhere around the same. This isn't as dramatic as Karate Kid. Where you were incredibly wrong.
Yes,
but in this, it's not like you hated the film. It sounds like you enjoyed it. As you said, you just thought it was a middle of the road film. Yeah. I think it's much better than that. I think this is like top tier horror in many respects, despite the fact that it doesn't feel like the majority of horror films. I think if you're just plonking it in that genre, say if we're going on the agreement that this is a horror film first and foremost, I think this is one of the better ones. I really do think it's that good. I don't think it's a 5-star, as I said, but I still think even, and I think it might have been, if I'd seen this in 1982, maybe I would have felt differently about it. But in 2021, I still think this is a 4-star film.
Fantastic. So obviously then, you haven't said it, but you would recommend this to others then?
I thought I did say it. Well, it doesn't matter. I absolutely would recommend it to others.
You went off
the thing
is, Steven Spielberg and Tobe Hooper, but in there you might have said that you.
I might have said something, but I tell you what, I think a lot of people, I don't have to recommend it because I don't think I've had such a response from certainly my close friends when they found out I was doing Poltergeist. Nearly all of them, I cannot wait to rewatch that. Like they were all, and I got absolutely dicked on TV because I bought the Blu-ray and the day it came, it showed up on BBC 4. I was like, motherfucker. But anyway.
But I'm so glad because I was literally about to rent it on Amazon Prime. And then you put that on Facebook that it was on BBC 4 that night. And I went, yep, fuck that, saving $3.50.
Yeah. Well, funny enough, because I even ended up watching it on BBC 4 because just by chance at 9 o'clock we were ready to watch the film, so I didn't even watch the Blu-ray, and that actually made me think that scene was it 14, 24 minutes in, whatever, with that weird cut. I was like, oh, they cut something out because it's on BBC, even though it's at 9 p.m. I was like, why would they cut something out at 9 p.m? Obviously wasn't. It's just because of Pizza Hut. Fucking Pizza Hut. Now, I'm going to do something pretty out of line here. I know we suggested for the third part of our horror trilogy, triple bill, whatever you want to call it, that we were going to do John Carpenter's Halloween because it makes sense. It's Halloween.
On Halloween, yeah.
I was going to say, how do you feel about maybe doing Nightmare on Elm Street instead? Because, and stick with me here, I grew up, I never watched Halloween when I was a kid, but I didn't rewatch it. I watched it for the first time like 4 or 5 years ago. And it's just, I don't have that attachment to it as a kid. And again, it's very much, when I think of it, I think of it as definitively a 70s film. And when I think of me growing up and I think of horror films, the first character that always pops into my head is always Freddy. And I'm like, how can we do a horror triple bill where we're mostly covering films from the 80s and not do Nightmare on Elm Street? It just seems madness to me. It seems like madness.
Lots of people now hearing behind the scenes talk that we usually
yes.
recorded.
Oh, well, I'd like to be very upfront. I like everything to be on the surface.
We talked about this and we talked about doing Halloween because it was Halloween. Mm-hmm. But after we talked about it, I thought, I don't really like Halloween.
Oh, well, the thing is, I rewatched it. Halloween, we'll do a very short version of it here. Halloween is a really well-made film and it's quite creepy, but because it's been iterated on so many times, it's no longer scary. It's just not.
I've never been a huge fan of Michael Myers. I'm not enamored with Halloween. So we were only going to do it because of the fact that we were recording on Halloween. So you do Halloween.
Yeah. Which makes sense. But now I fucked everything up.
No, that's absolutely fine because I prefer Nightmare on Elm Street over Halloween. I'm not going to go into my feelings for Nightmare on Elm Street either, so we'll get to that next week. I'm happy to do Nightmare on Elm Street. So
awesome. As I said, it's just because I do have that attachment to Nightmare on Elm Street. And as I said, when I think of horror films when I was younger, late 80s, going into early 90s, it was ahead of Jason Voorhees, miles ahead of Mike Myers. It was always Freddy Krueger. I think he, to this day, is still the quintessential horror icon, in my mind at least, anyway.
Does this mean I get 2 picks going on now? Because you've had Poltergeist and Nightmare on Elm Street.
No. Fuck that noise. I got absolutely dicked a few weeks ago when it was like suddenly we're doing podcasts with Australians. Dave is going up picking, and all of a sudden I'm like, I haven't picked a film in like 6 weeks.
But you then
I'm getting Nightmare on Elm Street, and then
you then got to pick after. So your pick was.
Oh, don't get me wrong. You get the following week, but then it's back to normal again.
No.
You just do 4 films in a row now.
I get 2 weeks, so we're going Garbage Pail Kids. Mario
Bros. No. The horror ends with a Nightmare on Elm Street. So before Rob can go convince anyone that the Garbage Pail Kids is a good idea, I'd like to thank you all for listening to part 2 of our horror triple bill. Please do join us next week for a Nightmare on Elm Street and not the goddamn Garbage Pail Kids. But all jokes aside, thanks for listening. Much appreciated all, and catch you all next week. Catch you. Bye. Oh yeah, and before I forget, because I always forget, here's Rob telling you where you can actually find us.
Yeah, so we're currently on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter under Hey You Guys 80s or at Hey You Guys 80s. And we're also on email at heyyouguys80s@gmail.com. Please feel free to drop us any emails, any recommendations, or any reviews you have. But whilst we're on about that, wherever you get your podcasts, please also smash the subscribe button. Yes, I said smash.
It's fine. Don't worry about it. It's fine.
Leave us a review and leave us some 5-star ratings as well. But make sure they're 5-star ratings.
Yeah. We're not interested in 1 star. 5-star. If it's not going to be 5-star, don't go smashing anything. Just leave your opinion to yourself. 5-star ratings only. But yeah, if you could do that, we'd really appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. See you next week.